to get that level of like bouncing back with each other, they had to have been like tight, you know. Because I mean, I used to love Laura as a commentator. You know, he was always like Laura and JR were always the guys to this on commentary, and I used to like Laura in the ring because he always used to wind up his opponent, and he cut stuff as well. And Kaufman, a comedian, like winding up Jerry Lawler, it was just fantastic. And I think I remember when WCW did that whole thing to promote that film with what's his name? He won the WCW title. What was his name? He was an actor.
David Arquette.
David Arquette, yeah. It just fell flat, didn't it? You know,
very much so.
But no, that Andy Kaufman thing. Oh, I tell you what, had me in stitches.
Yeah, it was way ahead of its time. And the brilliant thing about it is Andy Kaufman. The story now. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but Jerry Lawler, he had like a documentary come out, and he speaks about the whole thing and how it all got together. And yes, they did pretty much work everything out, but they worked it out enough to be able to, for everyone else to believe it, if that makes sense. Like, they never met, they were never seen together. It was just all over the phone, and very like secret hotel meetings, and it was just done really, really well. But the build up towards it, like the amount of stuff Andy Kaufman was doing off his own back with the whole intergender matches, and you can see those videos now on YouTube, and they are like fantastic. But again, if you put that out now with the whole politically correct stuff, my God, I don't know where it would end up. But the whole thing about the woman needs to be cleaning the dishes, and there's no woman, and of course, most of those women that he challenged were plants anyway. But people back then obviously bought it and were like, you know, kill this guy. I don't care what it takes, stop him. And you know, he would just bully, but it kind of resulted in him going to Memphis, and the whole build towards it was perfect because they have the match, and then if you remember, he takes the power driver, and then there's this whole other angle where he goes out on a stretcher, and you know, he actually goes through the whole thing where as if he's like really broke his neck and stuff, and he stays in the cast. And they were saying he took it to the point where he went all the way into the hospital. He asked them to keep him there so that the press people outside would see him come out in the morning with the head stuff on. And I mean, talk about commitment. Crazy times. But anyone should definitely go and check Andy Kaufman out as quite a character. Obviously, he wasn't a wrestler, but he definitely got. He enjoyed, I think, that whole getting reaction from people, like on another level. Really. You know, really favoritism. So obviously, like with the whole British wrestling scene as it is now, I mean, like I said earlier, I've never been at a time where we're picking between different promotions to go to. You as a performer, as a wrestler, how has it been, so to speak? I mean, do you have any intentions of like, do you have like goals that you set yourself every year, or do you sort of do it more day by day? Like, do you ever think of, you know, I want to get to this match, or I want to work in this promotion, or is it just sort of take it as it comes with you?
So I've got sort of ideas in my head of where I want to be in the next couple of years. You know, I ask around like who's ideal to wrestle for. And then sometimes it'll be because a lot of the guys, they wrestle on multiple promotions, and I'll see guys from this promotion who I've seen on other shows doing this promotion. And a lot of the times guys will say, well, why don't you come and wrestle for these guys, or try wrestling for these guys, because you get a whole different audience. And, you know, I remember talking to Jordan Said, and his goal was to increase the amount of promotions that he was on at any time, which was quite an interesting goal. You know, because I was always quite loyal to the promotions I was on, and because back then it was the promotions were tied to the schools. Now you've got the schools promotions, and then you've got their sister promotions. You've got other promotions that work well together, and there's other promotions that don't work well together. You know, I'm not going to name any names, but there are certain promoters that don't get along with other promoters, with other wrestlers. And but it's handy to have all these different shows, because then it's a nice bit of work for guys like us to go away and do all these different shows. And you go back in the old days where everyone had to do the camp shows, and it was just like you wrestled here or you wrestled there.
Yeah,
where you get a nice variety, and it's nice because then I can wrestle one guy on this show, and then I can wrestle the same guy on a completely different promotion. And there's been times where we've done the exact same match, but it's for a different promotion, and they all then it's they enjoy it all the same.
Yeah,
and there's other guys that I would love to wrestle. It was on the Triumph show. I was talking to Simon Miller, and one of the audience members saw me talking to Simon and actually said, "I'd love to see you two guys get in the ring." Because Simon's quite a tanky guy himself.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm up for it if you're up for it." I said, "Yeah, of course I'm up for it, mate."
Set.
It'd be interesting to sort of see other promotions and do other stuff. I mean, I'm working hard, training with Hustle. Start doing more shows. Well, do more with Hustle and start doing shows with Hustle, and then obviously the big goal is the big guys at the end. But you can't bank on that being the end all of end all. I've got my career, and I've got stuff back here, and that if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, at least I gave it my best. So I guess it's a mix. I'll take each day as it comes, but I've also got my goals and ambitions that I work towards. And you've got to have your dreams, you've got to have your ambitions at the end of the day. Otherwise,
no, I agree. And like I think for much younger wrestlers just starting out, like I know probably something that we've spoke about a lot on this podcast with a lot of the new guys, but it's fascinating to hear how they look at the wrestling business, because it's kind of almost alien to me, because there's so many promotions, there's so much work. Whereas, back in the day, like you were saying, it was very few and far between to get on shows, and much less to actually, make a bit of a living out of it on the side and stuff like that. And obviously with NXT UK now being based in the UK as well, it's almost more tangible. It's more interlinked than ever. And, the fact that with social media and stuff like that, you could be seen almost anywhere at any given time. I think really at the moment, British wrestling, it kind of, in a way, it's kind of like, I mean, I've been going back on a lot of the 70s territory stuff, but we've almost got that kind of thing in the UK in a lot of ways, where that sort of territory sort of system is set up very well in the UK, because there's these plants and these promotions coming out of everywhere, but they kind of have a very dedicated spot and location to begin with, and then they sort of branch out a little bit further. But I kind of feel like there's no better time than now. Well, not quite now, obviously, but before all this kicked off, to be a wrestler, because everything just seems so much more in reach than it ever was. Because WWE, I mean, I'm sure when you first started, must have been miles apart. To think that that this gigantic WWF at the time, or WCW, could ever be sort of breached into. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now it's very much more interlinked, isn't it? Like everybody seems to know everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's the crazy thing. I mean, like when I first went into it, a lot of these guys that I've training with, they were guys that were down the road, and all of a sudden, we had a show, Triumph, and Willow Spray turns up.
Yeah, totally.
He lived around the corner, and it was, and then all of a sudden I go around my friend's house in Plymouth, Portsmouth, and he's watching Willow Spray on the telly.
Right.
Oh, that was the guy that came to the show the other week.
Yeah.
He just came on to say hello, and it's it's crazy how because the sort of independent thing has become more of a market. And there's a lot of opportunities, but not just like the lads who are wrestling. There's more opportunities for a lot of people. to sort of get involved in stuff. And I remember once talking to a lad at training, and he didn't quite have what it took to physically be a presence, but he was really good at talking. And he's really popular now in the wrestling circuit, because of his wrestling or his shape or anything like that, but because he's just so good on the microphone.
Yeah.
And, and I've sort of said to him, you should be a manager. You should be like the Bobby the Brain Heenan. What's his name? Paul Heyman and stuff like that. You could be that side of it. There's I've seen guys that are making a career out of being referees. Jake Pugh is probably one of the best commentators in the UK. Yeah. And he gets all of his work just by commentating because he's just such a good talker in the ring. And there's opportunities for guys to make a living out of other bits. One of the wrestlers, he rents out his ring to other promotions, and he makes his sort of living from that. And there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of people now, and it's crazy to think when I first started and how it was to where it's become, and sort of being in that journey, to see it all unfold is quite, it does blow your mind, really. It's how amazing how things have come, in the sort of 16 years I've been doing it. It is quite fascinating to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never been, as I say, it's never been a more busier time than more recent before all this hit. That's for sure. In British wrestling, and we've got Jake on soon actually on the podcast, so that'll be cool to talk about those stuff. But
said hi.
Yeah, I will do, my friend. Now, coming to the end of the podcast now, guess I should ask a few questions I ask everybody. Is there anybody that you've sort of seen recently over the last year or so that you thought that's going to be a top guy, or somebody that doesn't get much recognition that you could scout out and tell us here on the podcast? Kind of putting you on the spot a little bit here, I know, but is there anybody that you've come across that you thought that's going to be a top guy in years to come, or you've seen something in somebody that maybe a lot of people haven't?
I'll tell you a guy who's going to do well, just because when I see him do his bumps and his skill, he's really entertaining. I can see him doing quite well. I can see him being an AEW guy, and that's from Hustle. I can see him being like a big thing in that sort of circuit. And Simon himself, because Simon's got the look and stuff like that, and because he's got the podcast, he's got such a good following on What Culture and stuff like that. He could be like a big guy in the future. And I feel like the Rebellion as a tag team especially in the independent circuit could do really well. There's a few girls that could do really well, because ladies wrestling has really taken off. I can see a few of the girls doing quite well out of it. And some guys, I can see them doing well. They might need to put on a bit more size just to give them that, I'm not talking about massive bulk. I mean, just a little bit, just to give them, so they don't look so kiddish, but then because they're quite young. Yeah. Well, that will come with age, because I was a scrawny little kid myself once. You put on a few when you get a bit older, so
that'll come. Don't worry.
But no, I definitely see them doing quite well.
Yeah,
business without a doubt. If it's in the big leagues or in another capacity, I could see them doing all right out of it.
Yeah, sure. That's cool. And obviously, as we said at the start of the show, we're all sort of in lockdown at the moment and things like that. What have you been putting your mind to during all this stuff? Is there anything, any Any stuff you've been watching, or you've come across, or you've got busy doing other projects? How are you keeping yourself busy?
Oh, well, Final Fantasy VII Remake, of course.
Yeah.
Had to play that. And Resident Remake, of course. Me and my